Do you ever get frustrated using Google Play while traveling internationally, finding that certain local apps just aren't available to you? Well, today I want to talk to you about why that happens and how I plan around it so it doesn't become a problem when I'm on the road. Welcome back to the channel. My name's Ian. I'm known as WanderBeard around here, and today is another one of my technical tips videos where I put my IT hat back on. One of the things I've always found interesting is how when you're traveling, apps on your phone can suddenly stop working, they can disappear, or just become unavailable. Apps you relied on back home may have no function at all of a sudden. And local apps you're told to install for things like transit, restaurants, or other services may not even show up for you. And of course, this always seems to happen at the worst possible moment. So this really isn't a Google problem. It's just kind of how these region-based systems work. So in the Google Play Store, app availability is tied to your region, not to your identity. That region is inferred from things like your SIM card, your IP address, and the country that's attached to your Google account. Developers themselves decide, where those apps are allowed. So when you cross a border, nothing's actually broken. You're just now being seen as being in a different region than you were before. So when I travel, I always assume that the access to apps is probably going to break in new regions. I don't rely on the idea that my primary Google account will necessarily work everywhere for every app. Instead, I build a redundancy into that system, just like I do with my money, as I talked about previously. I plan for access to fail so it doesn't become a problem. The key thing to understand here is that Google Play doesn't care who you are, it just cares where you are right now. So what are some real-world examples of this? Well, the biggest one I've run into while traveling is transit apps. A lot of cities and regions have their own dedicated apps that include routes, schedules, and in many cases are even tied directly into payment systems. The same thing applies to local banking or payment apps, food delivery apps, and ride-hailing services. In some places, Uber isn't available at all, and there's a local alternative that only shows up if you're registered in that region. You can even run into this with local government or health apps, things you may actually need for day-to-day life while you're traveling. Losing access to those apps can block real-world actions. This isn't about convenience, it's just about basic function. So again, the important thing to understand here is that Google Play ties app availability to the region of your account. So when I'm in a new country for any length of time, I don't try and force my original account to behave differently. I don't try and update the region on my primary account because you can only do that once every 12 months. Instead, I just give Google the correct context. So once I'm using a local SIM and I'm clearly in that region, I just create a new Google account on my phone that's associated with that country. That account is now correctly tied to where I actually am. So just to make this a bit more concrete, here's what this looks like for me in real life. So to do that, just simply go into the Google Play app, and where it normally would say sign in, you can say create account. When you click on create account, it will then prompt you to say, is this for personal use or work or business? Just select personal use. From there, just go through and fill out the information. Put in a name, an optional last name, maybe the country you're visiting, just to keep them separate and understandable. Fill in the usual stuff related to birthday and gender, and then it will give you the option to select an email address. From here, I will usually recommend creating your own email address rather than one of the ones it gives you. Again, this is just to make things easier for yourself to keep track of things. Of course, after this, you want to create a very strong password, something that is unique and long and not easily guessable. At that point, you want to confirm that the information looks correct, and then I can switch to it inside the Play Store, and suddenly the local apps that were missing become available, because from Google's point of view, everything now makes sense. And there's no hacking involved here. I'm not bypassing any restrictions. I'm just aligning my new account with my new location. When I arrive in Guatemala, for example, I pick up a local SIM card, I put it into my phone. Once I was clearly on a local network, I then created a new Google account that was then associated with that country. I then added that account to my phone, switched to it inside the Play Store, and immediately the local apps I've been struggling to find suddenly became available. Transit apps, local services, all the things that just weren't showing up before. Nothing was being tricked or bypassed. From Google's point of view, everything finally lined up. The account, the SIM, and the location were all telling the same story. And once that's in place, access stops becoming unpredictable. It becomes boring, which is exactly what I want. Much like I talked about in the last video, as you get older and as you travel more, you tend to have a lot less patience for friction. We rely on digital systems more than ever before, and it's much harder to recover when you suddenly lose access to something you depend on. Planning for these situations ahead of time removes a lot of that stress, and that's really the point here. This isn't about outsmarting systems, it's just about making your travel more relaxed, more enjoyable, and less complicated. Just before I wrap this up, I want to be clear about what this is and what this isn't. This isn't a workaround guide for Google, and it's not about bypassing rules or restrictions, and it's not technical advice that's going to apply to everyone. This is just simply a personal system that works for me, and it helps me make access to the apps I need while traveling more predictable and less stressful. So just remember, systems are allowed to fail. Planning is what makes that failure boring. Digital access is just infrastructure, it's not magic. The goal isn't perfect access, the goal is predictable failure, so that if something does go wrong, you already know how to work around it. Much like the last video on financial redundancy, this is really the same idea. You're just preparing for failure and knowing what to do when it happens. And if you're enjoying these travel and tech topics, please let me know. I have a few other ideas along these lines, and I'm happy to keep exploring them if there's interest. Having spent a long time in IT before I started traveling, this overlap between systems and life on the road is something I find genuinely useful, and I'm curious if you do too. If you found this helpful, feel free to leave a like or a comment down below. It really does help the video reach the right people. If you'd like to support my project further, I've recently moved my memberships over to Patreon. There's no obligation at all, but it's there for anyone who wants to support the channel more directly or get a bit closer to my process. As always, thanks for watching. And remember, life is short. Wander. And I'll see you in the next video. Pretty spectacular views here just as we're heading down the canyon. Just sheer drop.